Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, January the 9th, 2025. Today I want to talk a little bit about Jupiter and what Jupiter is doing. Jupiter is currently retrograde, so that's not great. It's in Gemini. That's not great. It's in Gemini. It is in the sign of its detriment because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. It's also peregrine. It doesn't have any dignity, and it lost dignity when Mercury moved out of Sagittarius into Capricorn. So I want to consider what this might mean and how perhaps it might have an economic impact. There does seem to be, I suppose, an increasing amount of economic pessimism. I mean, certainly in terms of the markets, there seems to be less exuberance in the markets at the moment, and people do seem concerned. And I suppose it all started sort of last month when the Federal Reserve announced that they were perhaps only going to reduce interest rates twice in 2025. So that has put a damper on things, but I thought it might be a good idea to track Jupiter over the first 6 months of this year. Perhaps consider also how it's affecting Donald Trump's chart, how it's affecting the USA's chart. When one thinks of Donald Trump, God, this Greenland thing keeps coming up, doesn't it, by the way? I mean, I know that's not quite relevant to Jupiter, or maybe it does have some relevance. And I wanted to consider very briefly this issue of Greenland and why Donald Trump might be so obsessed with Greenland. But before I do all that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, January the 9th, 2025. If you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this video, I would be really happy if you were to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. So here are the positions of the planets for noon on Thursday, January the 9th, 2025, and you can see New York time that the moon is at 25 Taurus. So moon, late Taurus, it does mean perhaps that we are looking for stability. We want things to be straightforward, though we can't help but notice that the moon is conjunct Uranus. In fact, it's conjunct Algol conjunct Uranus. So I suppose that moon conjunct Uranus may make things a little bit unstable. Why would things be unstable? I suppose because people are holding on to things. They don't want things to change. And I suppose if you don't want things to change, that in itself can actually create instability. Change is part of the unfolding of the universal will, you could say, and you need change in order to keep things going. And if you don't have change, things become rotten, they become inflexible, and in the end they just collapse. So a bit of change is actually necessary to maintain stability, strange as that might sound. But the question is, how much change can we handle? But it is moon conjunct Uranus. It's I would have said not a massively important aspect because it's so fast. I mean, there will be a time, sort of around noon, New York time, when the moon is conjunct Uranus. Okay, not quite noon, perhaps late morning. It will be. It'll be at a different time zones, but I suppose the fact that the moon is in late Taurus, Uranus is in late Taurus, that might just create a certain amount of turmoil, but I don't think anything too dramatic, especially as we have the moon making a trine to the sun. So the moon in Taurus is trine the sun in Capricorn, and that trine is pretty good. It's always good to have a moon trine sun. It creates balance. The yin and the yang are in balance. The male and the female are in balance, and it's supportive. It's life affirming, and the fact that the moon and the sun are both in earth signs, it's stabilizing. And if we have to deal with change, we can deal with change in such a way that it doesn't cause complete chaos. So really, that's the main stuff going on this today. I mean, yesterday was a really hectic day astrologically. Today, I think things really do settle down a bit, though there is another aspect to consider, and that is a semisextile between Mercury and Pluto. You can see that Mercury is 149 Capricorn, Pluto is at 120 Aquarius. So Mercury represents how we are trying to understand things, and Mercury in Capricorn, I suppose, we're trying to be very down to earth about it. We're trying to look at the details, make sure that we can make sense of everything. But then it makes a semisextile to Pluto. So that semisextile represents something we're trying to integrate, something we're trying to understand, but maybe hard work. And that might be Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius represents the new and the challenges of the new. I mean, in this case, I think it does. And so if you are trying to work something out and it's not easy, you need to keep working at it. That's what semisextiles are about. Semisextiles are not about conflict, but there's just about something that is quite uneasy. I suppose the way to see it is that a semisextile is a 12th of a circle, and 12 is 3 times 4. So you could say that 12 is 3 times 2 times 2. So 3, prime number involved in it, is about ease. Things running together very easily, and there's a certain trineness to that number, because a trine is a third of a circle. But 3 times 4, that 4 represents the square, or you could say it's an opposition times an opposition, 2 times 2. So it does bring together the ideas of struggle and ease. And so we're trying to make something come together easily, but it's not entirely straightforward. And so that goes back to this Pluto, but we're trying to make sense of. And so, what is that what is that change? The challenge of the new, the challenge of the future that you are trying to integrate. And I suppose I should point out that the moon is changing signs at 1:07 a.m. tomorrow. So that doesn't really impact you if you are outside the Americas. Now, if you are in the Americas, that does mean that this evening, or perhaps even late this afternoon, the moon will be moving out of Taurus and into Gemini. So that is a change, and it provides a new focus. And I think with moon in Gemini, we start to get some flexibility into the system, and we're not perhaps so bound by the material world and having to deal with the realities and the restrictions of a material world, and we can perhaps be a little more flexible. But really, that moon in Gemini is something relating to tomorrow, and I think in tomorrow I'll go into greater detail about it, what it means for the moon to be in Gemini. Now, yesterday, and perhaps a couple of earlier days, I made a little bit of a mistake about the North Node, and it was pointed out to me in the comments that I had said that the North Node was going to stay in Aries until the end of January. Now, that is true if you're looking at the mean node, but as far as the true node is concerned, actually the true node moves out of Aries into Pisces on Saturday. So in 2 days' time, the node is no longer in Aries, it's in Pisces. And I'd sort of underestimated the speed of the true node. And I was thinking, well, it might sort of go backward and forth across the sign. I hadn't really looked at the ephemeris properly. I mean, I'd looked at Raphael's ephemeris, but Raphael's ephemeris just looks at the mean node, but other ephemerides focus on a true node, and I think the true node is the one you should be looking for, in the same way that when we look at Black Moon Lilith, we should look at true Black Moon Lilith rather than mean Black Moon Lilith. And actually, with Black Moon Lilith, there can be a substantial difference between true and mean Black Moon Lilith. It's not just some minor point. With a node, there is not a huge amount of difference between the two, but certainly the 11th of January, Saturday, is when the sign change takes place. And I don't want to say a lot about it now, but it is a big deal, because the North Node, in a way, is, where we're all supposed to be going. And with North Node in Aries, there is a call for action. It's not a time to be just standing back and watching other people get on with it, not intervening. So hopefully, in our own ways, we've taken advantage of North Node in Aries, but now it's on the verge of moving into Pisces. So what we have there is the position of a planet set for noon New York, moon at 25 Taurus. If we look at the chart for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and Eastern Asia, the moon is at 15 Taurus, so earlier in the sign. And there's not a huge amount of difference, except the fact that at noon Sydney time, the moon will be exactly sextile Saturn. And so if you are in Australasia, then maybe that is the main aspect, and that's what you should be thinking about, moon sextile Saturn, particularly around the beginning of the day, around lunchtime. Moon sextile Saturn, I mean, it's a very fortunate aspect, I would have said, and it allows you to bring things down to earth. It creates a certain amount of stability, and it's not as crazy as that moon conjunct Uranus. So if you're in the Americas, today's more about moon conjunct Uranus. If you're in Australasia, it may be more about moon sextile Saturn, and obviously there is a difference. So I would have thought, if you're in Australasia, the day is likely, all things being equal, to be more stable and more predictable than it will be if you're in the Americas. So as far as the heliocentric position is concerned, we do still have a grand trine between Mercury, the Earth, and Saturn. I did talk about that yesterday, but this grand trine is still there. So Earth, Mercury, Saturn. I mean, if we just look at it, Earth trine Mercury, that's about communication, being able to talk. I mean, Earth, we're here on the planet Earth. Trine Mercury, there are things we can say. Perhaps communication is going to be very important if you're a government. I do think, by the way, that the heliocentric positions of planets are more important for collective organizations, like governments, bureaucracies, maybe large companies. I don't think it's quite so much about the individual, but still, if we want to take, it's like if we want to take advantage of it, then I think we can with Earth trine Mercury. So we've got something to say. If it's something important, then now might be a good time to get our message out into the open, especially as the Earth and Mercury are trine Saturn, so there might be a constructive sense to it. I mean, I said sort of yesterday that this grand trine might be about saying goodbye, saying farewells. I would repeat that message. It might be a time when we feel we have to communicate that something has ended, and perhaps governments are feeling the same way, that something is changing, that they can't go on as before. And I suppose some governments are having to face reality. I mean, and that's perhaps what a lot of people are feeling. And it's not just about the heliocentric position of the planets, it's also about Jupiter. I think that Jupiter is currently in a very weak position, and that is making it difficult for us to be enthusiastic. And so that is reflected in the heliocentric chart, because we have a trine between Mercury and Saturn, exact trine to form the grand trine, Mercury trine Saturn, and then Mercury moves on to making a trine with Mars. So there is a lot of energy flying around, suggested by this heliocentric chart. And just because Saturn is involved doesn't mean to say that energy is blocked. One has to ask, what kind of energy is it? I mean, Mercury trine Saturn might be about trying to be in control, by perhaps delivering a harsh message. And I suppose if we want to bring things down to earth, perhaps that's what we have to do. We have to say something serious and give the impression that we really mean it. So that grand trine, I would have said, is a main feature of the heliocentric chart, and I think it's actually quite important. I mean, and it's kind of exact, and Mars gets drawn into that grand trine, and Mercury will be making a trine to Mars. Maybe not today, but tomorrow we'll start to feel that, and so there is something perhaps serious that needs to be said. So let me now move to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, January the 9th, 2025. Aries. Aries, just a reminder that the North Node is about to leave your sign. You've got about 2 days left before the true node moves out of Aries and goes back into Pisces. So this is in some ways quite a powerful time for you, when you do get a strong sense of destiny and purpose. And it may feel, Aries, that over the last couple of years there's something important that you should have been working on, and maybe you did, maybe you were working on it, maybe you weren't working on it, but it's now a time to perhaps reflect. How well did you do, and are things really coming together as they should be? So consider your progress with 2 days left before the North Node moves out of your sign, and it may be that you have to do something, somewhat dramatic to cover yourself in case there's anything missing. So there might be a sense of obligation, a feeling that something has to be done right now, because if you miss your chance, you won't get another chance. Remember, the North Node is a slow mover, moves very, very slowly, stays a couple of years in each sign, so it'll be a couple of decades before the Moon returns to Aries. And while that's going on, Moon is moving through Taurus. It's making a conjunction to Uranus, and Aries, that might say something about your finances. It's possible, and you may be more financially aware than usual, and you'll be thinking perhaps about what you need to do to stabilize things. And you also might be very much holding on to old ways of working, old ways of functioning in a financial sense. I mean, that might be a good thing. There could be something quite traditional about your approach to money, feeling you're not going to embrace the new. If someone tells you what to do or someone advises you to do something, I don't think you're necessarily going to want to act on this advice, because at a certain level you feel you've kind of got it right, and you just don't want to be bothered to change your system. But consider the possibility that it might be time where an approach to money that you've had for years might not be entirely appropriate. It might not be keeping pace with a changing world, but you have to work it out for yourself and get qualified advice in terms of what the right thing to do actually is. And while this is going on, I think that you are aware of outside events that could impact your finances and your economic well-being, and you perhaps are reading the news more than usual, or perhaps you should be reading the news more than usual. Do think about what's happening in the economy and how the economy could impact you. And it might not be anything you really want to bother with. It might feel as if it's beneath you, that it's just not what you're interested in. You're interested in doing what you want to do. You're a free spirit, so who cares what's going on with the wider economy? Well, it does seem that the wider economy, in the end, could have an impact on you. So don't underestimate that. Now, the moon is moving through late Taurus, and towards the end of the day, certainly in the Americas, the moon is making a sextile to Mars. So that moon sextile Mars, it kind of sounds quite dynamic, but we have to remember that Mars is in Cancer, moon is in Taurus. So that moon sextile Mars may be about you making a move to make yourself more secure. And it could, going back to money, it could be about money, and it could be something you decide that needs to be resolved, and you're able to do it quite quickly and quite efficiently. But don't allow yourself to fall victim for unnecessary fears, because the moon is on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, so if you are making changes of a material nature, make sure you are very down to earth, because with that moon sextile Neptune and the fact that the moon is on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, it's just a certain danger that you follow the wrong thing or you get distracted. So, don't allow yourself to be distracted, Aries. Taurus, for most of the day, probably all of the day, or depending on where you are, the moon is moving through your sign. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then late this afternoon, this evening, the moon will move into Gemini. But, by and large, it's another day where the moon is in Taurus. And so with the moon in Taurus, I think that you'll be able to function pretty well. I think you'll understand the world around you, and also you can create constructive change, and that is because there is a conjunction between the moon and Uranus in Taurus. And so with moon conjunct Uranus, you're not going to be totally comfortable with the way things are, and perhaps the way other people are as well, and you might feel that now might be a time to shake things up a little. But I don't think in a particularly dramatic way, and I don't think that you need cause offence, for example, especially as the moon is not just making a conjunction to Uranus, it's making a trine to the sun. So we've got moon in Taurus, trine the sun in Capricorn, and I think that aspect gives you a certain amount of well-being, a feeling that you're able to tune into the universe, that your ideas are in tune with what you what you see. So I think in a way there is a certain amount of cognitive sonance. I mean, we hear a lot about cognitive dissonance, but actually I think there's some cognitive sonance. In other words, that your understanding of the world is actually not complementary. Your understanding of the world is kind of accurate. There's not a mismatch between what's going on out there, what's happening in terms of your head, and it kind of fits in, and that relates to that moon trine sun. So you do feel that you, to a great extent, fit in, and at the same time, in your own way, you can be quite authoritative. I think that you know what's right, you know what can be done, you know what can't be done, and if anyone is transgressing the rules or is doing something that is going to get them into trouble, then I think, Taurus, you're going to have no difficulty raising the matter. And I think actually you can raise your concerns, any concerns you might have. I mean, you might have no concerns, but if you do have any concerns, I think that you can raise these concerns in quite a dramatic and forceful way. And yeah, if you need to lay down the law, then I think you certainly can. So if your work involves any form of authority or compliance or whatever, I think you'll have no difficulty bringing people into line. And if anything is not right, I think you'll notice it extremely quickly. So that's certainly something to be welcomed. And don't be closed-minded. I mean, that also is important. You can experience something new without your view of the world being upset. And this goes back to what I was saying about cognitive sonance. With cognitive sonance, it all fits in. So the more you discover, the more you unearth, the more things are confirmed. So, don't be afraid, Taurus, of learning something new, because I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's going to benefit you, and I think that you really can afford to be open-minded. Sometimes Taurians can be a little bit concerned about learning something new or discovering something new, but right now I don't think there's any problem at all. And we do have a moon sextile Mars, particularly late in the day, and that moon sextile Mars does facilitate good communication. You're able to come over fairly forcefully without being a bully, and you'll also be able to stick to the point and be able to concentrate on what matters. And I think the people you talk to, the people you communicate with, are going to appreciate that. And it may be that there is a bit of uncertainty that other people are experiencing, and maybe something you say can put people's minds to rest. Gemini, the moon, for most of the day, probably all of the day, is moving through Taurus. And because of that, I think Gemini, you might feel that there's not a great deal that you want to do. You certainly don't want to make too much of an effort, and you may be asking yourself, what is the point? And there just could be a sense, Gemini, that you feel that you can't be yourself, that you have to, in a way, hold something back. And you're asking yourself, what would happen if you were to reveal your true self? Well, as far as you're concerned, what would happen is that you might be ignored, or you might not be taken seriously. And so you do feel that it is best to hold back. Now, if you're in the Americas, that does change. Late afternoon, this evening, the moon moves out of Taurus into your sign, and so that does create a change. And I think that late in the day in the Americas, you're going to feel a lot more optimistic, and it will feel that things are happening, and that you can perhaps afford to take a few more risks, perhaps in terms of revealing things, talking about things. But it is late in the day, so the question is, how much can you do this evening? As far as when that, if you're in the Americas, when that sign change happens. Well, it's at 7 minutes past 8 Eastern time in New York, which would be 7 minutes past 5 in California or British Columbia or Oregon or Washington State. So it is late in the day, so it just may be, Gemini, that you're not really able to take full advantage of that sign change. And if you're in Europe, Australia, Asia, Africa, forget it. The moon is going to be in Taurus all day, and that's just the way it is. Now, from your perspective, probably the main aspect today is a semisextile to Pluto, and I regard semisextiles as being quite tense aspects. I certainly don't regard semisextiles as being good aspects. It's because you've got two planets in signs which are right next to each other. In this case, Mercury in Capricorn, sextile Pluto in Aquarius. And, often these signs don't really have much to do with one another. Okay, I understand that Capricorn and Aquarius, the common link is Saturn. Both are ruled by Saturn, and so that might suggest a certain commonality there. But Capricorn and Aquarius are very different signs, and so the way we might see this is that Mercury in Capricorn represents you, trying to make sense of things, and Pluto in Aquarius is a challenge. It might feel as if you're trying to understand something. You're perhaps getting close to understanding something, and then there's something else, and it might actually be the shock of the new. Something new could be relating to technology, or maybe the way your society is changing, and you see it and it just doesn't fully make sense. It just seems to be something you don't want to be bothered with, but it just won't go away. It's like that. It's just this irritation. At first you try to ignore it, and then you just see that it's there. I kind of think it reminds me of a tick. I don't know if you've ever been bitten by a tick, but I remember when I was in Slovakia being bitten by a tick, and it's a strange thing being bitten by a tick. It's like there's something on you at an unconscious level, but you just sort of ignore it. And apparently ticks, they inject antihistamines and anti-inflammatories and painkillers into you, so just to make sure you don't notice it when it first bites. And so there is this thing on your body that I got bitten on my hand and my leg, and then you ignore it. And then you suddenly notice, hold on, there's something on me, and I can see its legs moving. And that might be how this Pluto semisextile, this Mercury semisextile Pluto actually works. And so with that, you realize there is an irritation, and it's something you actually have to take notice of. In my case, there's this tick extractor can get rid of the ticks, and you can also, I think I took an antibiotic just to, I don't know, so apparently if you take the right kind of antibiotic, it can reduce your chance of getting Lyme's disease or whatever. Anyway, I suppose there is a difference. The analogy doesn't fit entirely, because Pluto is not just a tick that something can be removed. It's something that's actually not going away. You can get rid of a tick. You can't get rid of Pluto. And Pluto is something you actually have to incorporate, and you have to make it part of who you are. And it seems to be something, Gemini, that you just don't want to do, but I think you have to do. And remember, the semisextile Mercury semisextile Pluto is, it is about 3 times 4. The 4 represents the squareness of this aspect, the 2 times 2, the opposition times an opposition. But there's also the threeness of the of the semisextile, because it is about a trine. It's about something moving, moving easily. And so if you make the effort, in the end, you're going to be able to accommodate the future and make it part of you. Won't be easy to begin with, but once you get going, you'll be fine. I mean, after all, you are a Gemini, and Geminis fundamentally can deal with the new, even if it takes them a little bit of time to get used to it. So, don't ignore that Mercury semisextile Pluto, and I think that perhaps represents the main challenge. Though overall today, I don't think it's a day when you're going to want to say much, interact with people, not particularly, unless perhaps you're in the Americas. Then this evening things might change as once the moon moves into Gemini. But overall, I think it's probably best to stick to your own company and not do anything too dramatic. But just remember, there is something out there that you need to incorporate, and it might be about the challenge of the future. Cancer, the moon is now moving through late Taurus, and with the moon moving through late Taurus, I think that you are feeling good. I mean, Cancerians, all things being equal, like it when the moon is moving through Taurus. Because the moon is exalted. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and I think that today you're going to be fairly tolerant. I think that in the sense that you can deal with quite a lot. You can move from one place to another place. The places might be very different. The places might be unfamiliar, but still you're going to feel that things are right, that things are ordered correctly, and that you are in control. And at the same time, I think you're going to have a certain ability to manage the social flow, and perhaps with the moon conjunct Uranus, you can create change. So if you go somewhere where you feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar to begin with, I mean, I don't think this feeling of discomfort or unfamiliarity is going to last very long. Even if that's your very first impression, then you can very quickly change things because of that moon conjunct Uranus. And so as you stay in one place, the longer you stay there, the more influence you have. And then the moon, having made that conjunction to Uranus, will make a sextile to Mars, and that's moon sextile Mars. Again, is quite assertive, and it allows you to be yourself. Remember, Mars is in your sign, so when you've got moon sextile Mars, then you can be the one calling the shots. You can be the one who is at the center of things. So, overall, I think it looks like a constructive day when you can bring to bear your fundamental individuality. Now, if you're an Australian Cancerian, slightly different feel to the day, because the moon is not making a conjunction to Uranus, it's making a sextile to Saturn. And I think with that moon sextile Saturn, you are possibly going to feel that things are more ordered. I don't think you're going to feel any need to create surprises. I don't think you're going to be surprised. And also with that moon sextile Saturn, that can be it can be a good time for relationships, because obviously Saturn rules Capricorn, your opposite sign. The moon represents you. So moon sextile Saturn is a good time to relate to another person and perhaps to stabilize an existing relationship and make things that everything is, I suppose, normalized. Now, Cancers in general, I do want to make a point about the North Node. I did make this point I think yesterday, but I kind of underestimated how quickly the North Node was moving backwards, and in fact, the Moon moves into Pisces on the North Node moves into Pisces on January. I think it's January the 11th, and that's a Saturday. So you've got a couple more days left of the North Node in Aries, and so this North Node in Aries, I think we need to kind of think about what that means. Just as the North Node is about to leave this sign, you've got 2 days left of a North Node in Aries, and North Node has been in Aries for a couple of years, and so with the North Node in Aries. By the way, I suppose I should tell you when the North Node did go into Aries. I mean, I don't know whether this means anything to you, but the North Node approximately went into Aries. I make it sort of happened July 2023. So it seems to it stays in a sign for about 18 months. So July 2023 was when the North Node went into Aries, and so since July 2023, I hope with this North Node in Aries that it's been a time where you have felt you were able to project yourself, where you were able to focus on what you wanted to do, what your ambitions were, and you perhaps understood your responsibilities, and you also recognized that you could be an authority figure. And this is something that I've been saying on and off when talking about your sign, that it is a time to be the center of attention, to get taken seriously with the North Node in Aries. And you've got a couple of days left. So I would kind of reflect on the last 18 months. How has it worked out with this North Node in Aries? Has it really felt that you were getting closer to your ambitions, or maybe not? I don't know. And so do work on it. And is there anything in the last couple of days that you need to finish, that you need to see through? Because once the North Node goes into Pisces, it's the North Node won't return to Aries for nearly 20 years. So kind of don't miss this chance. So perhaps at the very least, Cancer, it's a time for some degree of reflection. And as I think I said yesterday, the North Node is making a square to Mercury. So North Node square Mercury, it may be in the last couple of days, if you do feel that you're coming short of some of your ambitions, some of the things you really wanted to achieve, it may be North Node square Mercury suggests that someone may be of assistance. Don't feel you have to do everything on your own. Mercury is at the beginning of Capricorn, your opposite sign. So Cancer, there is someone who can help you out, who can help you understand what's going on and also help you understand what needs to be done. And you don't have very much time left, but you've got Thursday, you've got Friday, I suppose you've got 2 days. I mean, maybe I'm just being over-focused on the astrology and we have to be realistic. I mean, what can be achieved in 2 days? But it does seem that there is something that can be done in the next couple of days. So, see what you can do. Leo, you do feel that you do want something to happen, and you kind of want it to happen now. There is a conjunction between the moon and Uranus in Taurus, and Taurus, high profile sign in a Leo chart, a sign that's often connected with career and ambition. And so with that moon Uranus conjunction, I'm hoping that you can really concentrate on what matters to you and be an individual. Yeah, it's really important to be an individual, because you have got something to offer. It's not a time to just do things other people's way. You've got a clear idea about the best way of getting things done, and in most cases I would have just said go for it. And if you don't do anything, if you just stay in one place, if you feel you can't be bothered or whatever, you're going to feel tense. I mean, I think there is some evidence that today Leos are going to feel rising tension levels. You'll feel that you want to create change, but at the same time you can feel the restrictions, and so you need to break out of that, and perhaps in one single move you could potentially change everything. I mean, it is possible. So consider what you would like to happen today, and be open. Even if it's something that seems far-fetched, it can happen. I think if you give it everything, if you give it your all. And Leo, it is important that you are noticed, as an individual, as someone who has got something very unique to offer. So don't hide. And I think that perhaps you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to the sun. So the sun is your ruler, moon is conjunct Uranus. So just before the conjunction to Uranus, the moon makes the trine to the sun. And so that moon trine sun, certainly in terms of getting things together, could actually be very useful. And so perhaps it's a situation where you have a chance to really make a big change. But first of all, you have to prepare the ground. And that's what it's about. You prepare the ground. You make sure that you're in the right place at the right time. You make sure any sort of complications from a recent past have been resolved. You make sure you've got a clear sight of what you want to achieve. And then, Leo, you can just go for it. And so I think that there is evidence here that you can really make things happen, and you won't feel any great sense of dis-ease. I don't mean disease, I mean dis-ease, because the moon is trine the sun. When the moon is trine sun, it is a time when you are feeling good about yourself, you're feeling healthy, and you just feel that you're in the right place at the right time. And so Leo, there doesn't seem to be too much to complain about, but just make sure that you go for it, make the preparations, and then things should work out very well. Virgo, we have the moon still in Taurus, and we have the sun still in Capricorn. And from a Virgo perspective, that's great, isn't it? I mean, Virgo is an earth sign, moon's trine sun. So I think that from an elemental perspective, you do kind of feel at one with everything. I mean, by elemental, I mean Virgo is an earth sign. Earth is about the material world, and it's about a world that you can touch. And so with the moon trine sun, you're at one with things, and you're not feeling estranged from what's happening. You are feeling by and large very connected, and things should be fine, except for the fact that Mercury is making a semisextile to Pluto, and while everything does seem to be flowing and you're feeling connected, there just seems to be just one thing that's bothering you, and it's represented by that Mercury semisextile Pluto. So the semisextile, I mean, it's called a semisextile because it's a 30-degree aspect. A sextile is 60 degrees, so half of 60 is 30. A semisextile is when you've got two planets, one sign followed by the other. So Aquarius follows Capricorn, Mercury's in Capricorn, Pluto is in Aquarius, and Pluto represents something that you can't quite get your head around. You can understand a lot of things. Everything is flowing today, by and large, except this one thing. There's one thing that you want to make it part of you, but you're wondering, how do you accommodate it? And if it's Pluto in Aquarius, you might say that Pluto in Aquarius represents perhaps the challenge of the new. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. And if you're dealing with the challenge of the new, it perhaps is somewhat disruptive. It's disruptive because it doesn't fit in with your normal routines, but it's something new and it needs to become part of your life, and making it part of your life could be hard work, and it may be something relatively trivial. For example, you might have recently acquired some piece of technology, and this technology could actually be very useful. It could be really helpful. It could allow you to be more productive, but you're unwilling to engage with it. I mean, you may have had this piece of technology for months. It may have been sitting in a box, and you just haven't wanted to open the box, and now might be the time. Or it's just maybe something to do with your computer or your phone, just something that you feel it's too threatening or too complicated, and you're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. So today, really try to embrace technology and make time for technology. I know that technology isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. We can live without technology, but I think that technology right now needs to take a different role in your life, and perhaps you need to give it a chance. So that might be how Mercury's semisextile Pluto works. Also, I suppose Mercury semisextile Pluto may be the challenge to make a change to improve your health. There may be something that you should be doing. I mean, you're thinking about it almost a bit obsessively, perhaps. And you keep thinking about it. If you only did this, if you only were to give up this, or you were to start doing this, whatever it is, if you were only to do that, then things would be so much easier, and you'd feel better both mentally and psychologically. Sorry, both physically and psychologically. So there is perhaps something that you're obsessing about, but you haven't wanted to deal with it. And because you don't deal with it, you keep obsessing about it. So those are a few thoughts on Mercury semisextile Pluto. Even if what I've said about Mercury semisextile Pluto doesn't make immediate sense to you, try to work with the symbolism. Mercury represents you, and it's semisextile Pluto. And Pluto represents something that you're not comfortable with, and perhaps you need to think about what that is and perhaps how you can integrate it into your life. And it is a time, Virgo, when you do need to be open-minded. I mean, after all, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Uranus in Taurus, and with that conjunction, I think that, you do have a chance to discover new things about the world, and you shouldn't be concerned about being shocked. Sometimes a small shock, I mean, not an electric shock, but a surprise can actually be good for you because it can help move you on. Now, one thing, if you are a Virgo in the Americas, then late afternoon, this evening, the moon does move into Gemini, and the moon moves into Gemini. It actually makes a trine to Pluto in Gemini. So very late in your day, if you're in the Americas, there might be something you want to do, or you feel you have to do, that may relate to your goals, your targets, your ambitions. And even though it's late in the day, you might feel that there's no time like the present. Libra, we have the moon continuing to move through Taurus, and I suppose with the moon moving through Taurus, you are so constantly reminded that nothing is simple, at least on the face of it. If you look at things and you consider your first impressions, it just seems to be complicated. And so what you have to do in this situation, Libra, is to consider the possibility that maybe you're exaggerating. Just because something feels complicated doesn't actually mean that it is complicated. And if you just embrace it, and if you get in touch with it, almost get so close that you can feel it, then it loses its complication. So it may be a situation where things are complicated from afar, but once you get close to them, so close you can touch them, then the complications start to resolve. And this applies to many different things. I mean, it might apply to money. It might apply to your own emotions. It might also apply to your work or your ambitions, or or your business, because there are a few complications, perhaps from a work point of view, work, career, status point of view, and there's something that you're grappling with, and it's just not as simple as you'd imagined, and you'd rather just leave it alone. But if you actually work with it, I do think that you can actually make sense of it, because firstly the moon is making a trine to Sun, and I suppose with the moon trine Sun, that would represent grounding something, telling yourself that it's not complicated, that you are going to deal with it, and starting to make sense of it. Then the moon makes a conjunction to Uranus, and so the moon conjunct Uranus may represent an insight. It suddenly occurs to you that things aren't as they seem, and perhaps something that you thought was difficult is actually not difficult at all. And then finally the moon makes a sextile to Mars, and so with that moon sextile Mars, you perhaps have a chance to actually take action. And once you take action, then things really become much simpler. And that's especially the case from a perspective of career and work, that moon sextile Mars. It doesn't have to be fast action, just starting the process going, and that should be enough. And also, Libra, it's important that you trust yourself. You trust yourself to know that you have got it right. It's very easy to be convinced that you're mistaken, that you've got it wrong. And I suppose, this word over the last couple of years that has been I don't know why now, this word gaslight just comes up again and again. And I think that you're not in a position where you have to be gaslighted. You might feel a bit gaslighted. You might feel, oh, you haven't got it right. Things are more complicated than you realized, and other people are telling you things are more complicated than they realize, so you perhaps need to keep quiet. But no, if you feel that something is right or something is wrong, and you get a strong feeling about it, then almost certainly your perceptions are correct. And it's not just your perceptions, it can just be your knowledge of facts, your knowledge of what is right, what is wrong, what can be done, what can't be done. And if you get those kind of feelings, you can be clear about it. And in fact, Libra, you can really lay down the law almost. You can just say, well, this is the way it is, and you know it is the way it is. And if necessary, you can point to your source. And that might be an important thing. So if you do feel that you need to say something, before saying something, you could find your source, so that you can quote chapter and verse at someone. I don't know. It might be that you can reference a law and say, well, it's this law, or it's if it depends what it is. I mean, if it's a piece of technology, it could be what it says in the manual, or whatever it is, whatever your sources are. I think you're able to back up what you say with something perhaps that is in writing. And so in that way, I think that you can establish your authority today. I mean, you might not feel you want to, but I think it is certainly something that you really can do. Scorpio, I think that other people are still going to be of some relevance, and it might be difficult today to just ignore other people and to pretend they don't exist, to pretend they don't have any influence. I think they do have an influence, and that is because the moon is continuing to move through Taurus, and of course Taurus is your opposite sign. And so I suppose you might just have this question, what are other people going to do next? What are they planning? And I think in most cases you can just be fairly open-minded about it. Let people do what they want to do, and then you can decide on your response. It's probably not a good idea to try to act before it has happened, because you don't know. You're not going to know what people do until they've actually done it, and then you can respond. And I think that it's actually quite a good day for responding. I mean, I know that activity, action, taking the initiative, they're often held in high esteem, but very often the person taking the initiative, is the person at a disadvantage, especially now when Mars is retrograde. Mars retrograde is not about taking the initiative. It's about holding back. It's perhaps allowing other people to take the initiative, especially in a competitive situation. Because with Mars retrograde, there is a certain sense in which the aggressor loses. And so, I'm not saying it's necessarily a situation where you're dealing with an aggressor, but it might be a competitor. But wait to see what people do, and then respond accordingly. Respond in a way that you feel is right. And I think that is the best way of handling things. And as far as the aspects are concerned, today we do have Moon trine Sun, and Moon trine Sun actually gives you just a good understanding of what people are doing, and I think you're going to be able to respond to people extremely well, and you'll know what to say. The words will flow, and you'll be able to make sense of things very quickly. But just don't try to guess. Just wait for something to happen before actually responding. Then the moon does conjunct Uranus. So moon conjunct Uranus, that is a reminder that certain people are unpredictable, and there are certain things happening in the outside world, but you don't know how they're going to unfold until it unfolds. But when it unfolds, when you have the knowledge, you will be able to respond, I think, extremely well. And then the moon's last aspect before leaving Taurus is a sextile to Mars. Of course, Mars is your ruler, and so that moon sextile Mars suggests to me really that in the end you are in control. It might not feel that you're in control, but in the end you really start to understand things, and you're able to respond in a way that suits your best interests. And things are complicated at the moment, and I think I mentioned this yesterday as well, but in terms of responding and other people, that's one way of looking at it in terms of this activity in Taurus, which is your opposite sign. Another way of looking at it in terms of the opposite sign, it is just things happening on the outside, things that you don't have immediate control of. And one thing you don't have immediate control of is the politics and economics of the society in which you live. Okay, you might be a president or a prime minister or a finance minister, but you won't be watching this, will you? You possibly got better things to be doing, but in most cases you're not going to have much control. And I think you understand this, and you understand that there are things happening out there of a political and economic nature that in the end they're going to have an impact on you. You know they're going to have an impact on you. Scorpio does just know, and I don't know how Scorpio knows. Scorpio just knows. You can feel it. You can't necessarily explain it, but you just know. And so in that sense, it might be a time for preparation and just making sure that if and when the storm happens, you're in the right place at the right time. But as far as economics is concerned, I will be talking about Jupiter later in the video, and I don't want to exaggerate it, because I'm talking about something that astrologically that affects you for a very short period of time. So this thing that I'm looking at it's just going to last a couple of days. So it just might be that you have a moment of awareness, a few days of awareness, where you start to look at economic cycles, business, politics, and you're wondering how it affects you, and then in a couple of days' time you'll move on. But still, do take advantage of the moment. It is a moment where you are particularly aware. So make sure Scorpio, that you use this awareness. Sagittarius, we have the moon in Taurus. Taurus, from a Sagittarian perspective, is not perhaps the most compatible sign. So with the moon in Taurus, you may feel that you're not quite your normal self, that you may feel a little bit more sort of vulnerable than usual. And in terms of your health, I think you are going to be, I think, listening to your body. You're going to be aware of your body, and there may be times where you feel a little bit sort of out of sorts, maybe with Moon in Taurus. So I think today, Sagittarius, it's a good idea to look after your health, though I don't want to make you unduly alarmed. After all, there is a trine between the Moon and Sun and the Moon. So Sun-Moon trines are actually quite healthy. They're quite life-giving. So with a Moon trine Sun, that suggests to me, Sagittarius, that there are things you can actively do to give your health a boost. And it may be that with Moon conjunct Uranus, there may be an awareness, perhaps, that something you're doing is not good for you. Or it could be an awareness that there is something you need to do to give your health a boost. So that might be how it works. So it's not a situation where you're stuck, where you have to accept anything. I think that Moon Uranus conjunction really allows you to make something happen. And in general, from a mental perspective, you are quite inspired at the moment. So Sagittarius, you might have sudden thoughts. You might be thinking about nothing in particular. Then you suddenly realize something, and it's exciting, and you start to see a possibility, and that's what you need, because at the moment, you're not feeling 100%. I don't think, and I don't mean that necessarily just on a physical level. It might be on a sort of a psychological level. It might just feel that there's not enough going on. Things aren't going on in the way you'd like them to be. It might all seem a bit boring and tedious, but then you just get an idea, and this idea could actually be very motivating, and you may start to become aware of a possibility. And once you're aware of a possibility, then Sagittarius, you're in a position to take action. And I think it's probably going to be easier to take action when the Moon moves out of Taurus into Gemini. Now, by and large, Moon moving into Gemini happens tomorrow, but in the Americas, this evening or even late afternoon, the Moon makes this change. And so Sagittarius, if you are in the Americas, you may feel a transition late in the day, and I think that you're going to suddenly feel more optimistic, and perhaps you'll feel that also that certain other people are more supportive. I mean, even if they're not right with you, not right in front of you, there will be more support and more excitement, more interest. So again, I don't know what you're doing this evening. If you're doing nothing this evening, if you're staying at home, well, that's the way it is. But it may be that you can engage with people, meet people, talk to them on the phone, and it could allow you to see things in a different way. I mean, you feel at the moment, Sagittarius, that you need some variety. And just right now, that variety might not be forthcoming. But American Sagittarians might see that variety late in the day. If you're not in the Americas, then tomorrow the Moon is in Gemini, and I think that is going to be a real boost. And I think you're going to feel more positive about yourself and what's happening around you. And yeah, when I do your forecast for Friday, I will look at this Moon in Gemini in detail. Capricorn, you remain, I think, in a position where you really can make things happen. So you shouldn't feel today that you're a passenger, that you just have to do what other people say. If you're not happy about it, well, just keep quiet. It's not like that. I think that Capricorn, it's a day when you really can express how you feel, and if you're not happy about something, you can be open and honest about it, and people will listen, and you'll get attention, and you're going to create change. So today, Capricorn, I do actually think that you have a considerable amount of agency, and you're helped by the fact that the moon is in Taurus for most of the day. So with the moon in Taurus, you in general are feeling good about yourself, and you do feel that you're in control, and the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus. So with moon conjunct Uranus, that suggests to me that you can do something actually that is quite original, something that may not have occurred to you before, and it suddenly you understand what can be done, and you just want to do it, and there's absolutely no need to worry about other people's opinions. I mean, you can take into account other people, you can talk to other people, you can listen to what other people have to say, but in the end, it's down to you to make things happen. And so that's something that, is quite exciting. And the moon is not just conjunct Uranus, it's trine the sun. And the moon trine sun, remember, we've got moon in Taurus, trine the sun in Capricorn. So that's a great aspect, and that really does give you a great sense of power, and in terms of what you can do and what you can achieve, and really there should be nothing stopping you. Now, I should say something about the nodes. The North Node, it sort of changes sign. I think approximately every 18 months or so, and the North Node is at 0 degrees Aries, and so I think since July 2023, the North Node has been moving through Aries, and on I think on Saturday, the true North Node changes sign into Pisces. But it's its movement through Aries that really matters to you, because Aries is a cardinal sign, and Capricorn is a cardinal sign. And so with this North Node in Aries, you may have found that a lot of your energy was maybe going into your home, or perhaps you were kind of trying to battle the North and South Node. So the South Node is in Libra, a sign in the Capricorn chart that's very much connected with work, career, status, being recognized. And so with South Node in Libra, you may have felt it was important to be recognized, but you also knew that that wasn't the right place for you, that the right place for you was the North Node, and that you should have been really focusing on giving yourself a sense of grounding. I mean, you can't be fully successful and be yourself unless you have given yourself grounding, and you need to sort of actively pursue that grounding with the North Node in Aries. And this North Node in Aries, it's going to be in Pisces on Saturday. It changes sign, it moves into Pisces, and that will represent a new set of challenges. But I don't think the North Node is going to be quite so important, because the North Node moving into Pisces is not an angular sign from Capricorn. I mean, the key sign with Capricorn, the key signs to watch with Capricorn, the signs you put most emphasis on, Capricorn, and the other cardinal signs of Aries, Libra, Cancer. And so with North Node in Aries, in the last couple of days of the North Node in Aries, it just may be that you're very aware of how much energy you're putting, for example, into your home and family, also how much energy you're putting into your work, and you're considering the balance. And the question is, how have you sorted out that balance? Have you got that balance right? And it may not be an issue of action, it may be more of an issue of contemplation, though we can't avoid the fact that Mercury is in Capricorn. So Mercury, it's not just that it's in Capricorn, Mercury is making a square to the North Node, it's making a square to the South Node, and okay, it's moving a bit away from that square, but I think it's still there to an extent. And so in terms of your thoughts about yourself, then I think you may be thinking about that balance, thinking quite hard about it. How much energy should you be putting into your home and your family? How much energy should you be putting into your ambitions? And you're trying to think about it, you're trying to balance it. And probably at this late stage where the North Node is about to move into Pisces, that Mercury in Capricorn may represent you making some reaching conclusions and perhaps making some decisions about what kind of balance you want. Security is great. It's always good to look for security. It's always, particularly if you're a Capricorn being an earth sign. But, once you've got what you want, once you do feel comfortable, then what? And that might be a question that you have to ask yourself. Aquarius, like yesterday, I don't feel that you really are in the mood for sort of too much movement. I think that by and large you're probably quite happy where you are, and that's the way it should be. And there is excitement where you are. You don't have to go anywhere to find excitement, and it's not the kind of excitement that is necessarily going to be too destabilizing, because there is a trine between the moon and the sun, and the moon is in Taurus, the sun is in Capricorn, and I think that this aspect makes you feel happy, gives you a certain amount of contentment, but you're also aware of your own power. But I just don't think you're quite ready to be out there, being seen and being heard. Especially if you're not in the Americas. If you're in the Americas, it's a slightly different situation, because the moon changes sign from Taurus to Gemini at, I think it's 8:07 p.m. sort of mid-evening. That would be 5:07 p.m. if you're in California. So New York, the sign change is at 8:07 p.m. in Los Angeles or San Francisco or Vancouver, British Columbia, or even Vancouver, Washington. Then the sign change is at 5:07 p.m. So if you're an American Aquarian, then you could say that it's a day of two halves, that the evening is going to be very different from the rest of the day, and there may be a chance to perhaps go further afield, not feel you have to be restricted to anything, perhaps being more adventurous. But looking at the day in general, Aquarius, I don't think there's a great deal that you really want to do, or really even feel that you have to do. Now, as far as what the main aspect today is concerned, if there really is a main aspect, well, geocentrically, we do have Mercury semisextile Pluto. So Pluto is in Aquarius, obviously, and so Pluto represents you, and it represents you having to sort of deal with the challenges of the new world in which we're living. It is a new world in a sense, that something has changed, and you're very much part of it. But Mercury semisextile Saturn represents a dichotomy between the new, something new which you are trying to represent, and maybe tradition. There is something traditional about Mercury in Capricorn. I mean, Capricorn is quite a traditional sign. And so with Mercury in Capricorn making a semisextile to Pluto in Aquarius, you may feel that on one hand you want to move forward, you really want to get involved in the future, but there are other things from the past which perhaps are very special to you. I mean, okay, I know that some Aquarians can be quite unsentimental, but all of us are sentimental at some level, and things from the past, thoughts from the past, you're trying to kind of balance them with what you have to do in the future. And so it might actually be a little bit troubling, having to sort of work it through, and you're tempted to just ignore it, but your mind is telling you something, and your mind is telling you that something from the past perhaps needs to be taken into account, and maybe you don't even want to talk about it. You might feel that if you were to talk about the past and your affection to the past, well, I don't know, you might look stupid. You don't want to come over perhaps as being too sentimental. But there is a role for the past. We can't just destroy the past. It's not Cambodia. It's not year zero where we can just remove, like Pol Pot, where we can sort of erase the past. That past does matter. Although I think with Pluto in Aquarius there is that temptation to erase the past, because it does have a totalitarian streak to it at Pluto in Aquarius, and if you want control of people, then you erase their past, you erase their history, and I suppose we're seeing it all the time, whether it's at sort of national level or local level. It seems to be something that people. Some people, particularly people in authority, are actually trying to do. So you do have to balance the past and the future with this Mercury Pluto sextile. But it is one day. I'm not talking about some massively long-term event. That Mercury will move on. Mercury will move away from that sextile to Pluto. But it's just a little reminder that you don't want to find that you are cut off from the past and cut off from your memories of the past. It may be things you also need to talk about or want to talk about, and you're just afraid that people might respond in the wrong way or you might look stupid. But no, the past really does matter. Pisces, you seem to have quite a lot to say for yourself, and in your own way, Pisces, you can be quite an exciting and interesting person. I mean, you have observations to make, and these observations might be somewhat unusual, a bit quirky, but today you can be original, and you mustn't be afraid to be original. And it just may be, Pisces, that you have a sudden inspiration about what is possible. You didn't think something was possible, but then you have an idea. And if you have an idea today, then don't just let it go. It's so easy to let ideas go. If something is good, sounds reasonable, sounds possible, then write it down. And don't be afraid to talk about it, because there is something exciting about you. It's not just one idea. I think you'll have lots of ideas, and there'll be something about you that's really sparkling with life. And in terms of how you communicate, there's a conjunction between the Moon and Uranus. Moon and Uranus is an exciting aspect, and so you don't have to just take things as they are, and you can say things that are a bit offbeat. You might even be able to shock people a little, and I think that you're going to, in the end, have quite a powerful impression, you'll be able to make a powerful impression, and you'll be helped also by the fact that the moon is making a trine to the sun. And I think that moon trine sun will allow you to really talk to lots of different people. I don't think you'll be bothered by who these people are. I think you'll be able to talk to just about anyone, and there will be something about you, Pisces, which I think is really very engaging. Though, it does seem that some of the people around you do seem to be bothered about something. They're trying to they're trying to grapple with the future. I mean, Mercury is making a semisextile to Pluto, and so Mercury could be another person, and Pluto in Aquarius could be, well, it might not be the future, but it could be something bothering them, something they're trying to integrate into their lives. And so if people seem a bit distracted, it's because they're trying to work something out and they don't understand how to deal with it. And it may be something very practical, like trying to deal with technology, or trying to deal with some aspect of the new, and they just can't cope with it. But I suppose it could also be psychological. Mercury semisextile Pluto. Pluto can represent sort of dark thoughts, worries, concerns, and so perhaps if people seem distracted, you should perhaps try to work out what's going on. Why do they seem bothered about something? Because it's probably something you can deal with, something you can fix. Something about you is reassuring, is stabilizing, with moon in Taurus trine the sun, and then the moon also makes a sextile to Mars, and so moon sextile Mars is about you being able to say something in a very dynamic way, and people listen to you. And again, that may be about how you can deal with Mercury semisextile Pluto, which is about people being bothered about something. I don't think it's about you being bothered about anything. And that's just about it, except for one thing. The North Node is about to move into your sign. And it happens, I think, on Saturday. So the North Node has been in Aries for, I don't know, the last 18 months, I think since July 2023. And the North Node is going to go into Pisces. And that's going to have relevance for you. And I think that North Node moving into Pisces could be a call for action. And so, do think about that. But I will be discussing North Node moving into Pisces in a day or two's time, probably when I look at the horoscopes for the weekend. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 25, which is innocence. Innocence is a hexagram about not expecting anything. We shouldn't expect anything. We should be innocent. We don't have any preconceptions about the way things should be. We don't have any hopes for the future. We just see what comes up. Hope. I know hope is a nice idea, but hope on its own can be a bit destructive. And it can, there's this word that's often used in the internet, often on sort of financial forums, hopium. I don't know, you probably come across this word. It's that hope is about hope, for example, that an investment comes good. And it's almost an addiction. It's hopium. We're addicted to this idea that we've got to be positive about the future, but we've got to think that something we've invested time and money in is eventually going to work out. But innocence is not about hopium. It's about just relaxing, not having any thoughts about what's going to happen next. And there is a certain naivety to it. And I think that naivety is actually completely appropriate. And there is a line moving, and the second line moves. And the second line moving, it certainly tells us that we shouldn't be expecting too much. We should be innocent. But it's also saying that we are guaranteed, almost, I mean, there's no such thing as a guarantee, I suppose, but whatever we're doing, we will be rewarded, provided we get it right. And what the I Ching talks about is, it's like saying, it talks about harvesting something, but not having planted it. Now that seems a bit unfair, that at least if you look at it on a surface level, we harvest something that we didn't actually have any responsibility for creating. And what that is really saying is that if we are in the right place, then we get it naturally. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to worry about it. It just happens. And that's perhaps about innocence, just strolling into something which is absolutely right for us. It's been prepared for us. And because it's been prepared for us, it all comes through very nicely and we get the benefits. So do think about that. Perhaps there are some choices that it seems that there is an opportunity here. Just be in the right place at the right time. Don't think about it. You work away and you get the benefits, and that's innocence. So that second line moving really is pretty fortunate. Now this moves because we've got a second line, we've got a line moving, and it moves to the hexagram treading. Now treading is a potentially quite a dangerous hexagram, at least on the surface, because it talks about tigers. And it's saying that we have to be very careful where we tread, because we might be bitten by the tiger. And so watch where you put your feet. And the tiger may represent something which has the potential to cause us a lot of damage, even to destroy us. But for some reason, it lets us go. It lets us go by. And, one way of looking at it might be that with treading, we plunge ahead. We move ahead. We move forward in a way that is perhaps not particularly advisable. We're too fast. We're too hasty. And under normal circumstances, we risk destruction because we are moving forward. But perhaps if we go back to the previous hexagram, everything is prepared for us and everything works. We move forward in perhaps quite hastily. But the tiger, which has the potential to destroy us, decides to just let us be. It can't be bothered with us. And so it seems that there is a certain amount of luck that we sort of just plough on, and we do things which are perhaps not particularly advisable, but somehow maybe we just manage to get away with it. Now, I don't want to encourage you to take risks. This is not what it's about. If you take risks, then they're likely to go wrong. But it goes back to that innocence. If you are innocent, you do what feels right, and it is right. And if it is right, if you walk on paths which have been prepared for you, then you will reach your destination. And even if it seems a little bit risky, I don't mean risky in a sort of physical sense, I'm not encouraging you to climb the Eiger or anything like that, but if you do that, you should be okay. So overall, in fact, today seems quite lucky, but as I'm trying to emphasize, don't push that luck too far. And now I want to look at Jupiter. I haven't really prepared a great deal on the subject of Jupiter, but I have been talking about Jupiter. Well, yesterday I talked about Jupiter, and I just thought it might be a good idea to look at what Jupiter is doing at the moment. And so let me just let's look at what's happening. So going back to the astrology of today, right now, Jupiter. If Jupiter is, as you can see, Jupiter is. Where's Jupiter gone? Jupiter is retrograde, and it's in Gemini. So what does Jupiter actually mean? I mean, Jupiter is the planet of good luck, and Jupiter is also the planet of expansion. And when you look at Jupiter, you should always see it in contrast to Saturn. And Saturn is the planet of restriction. It's tightening one's belt. It's spending less, having less money available. So those two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, they are the great chronocrators, the ruler of time. And I just wanted to specifically look at Jupiter and what Jupiter is doing at the moment. And in this section on Jupiter, I probably am not going to create any chapters for it, because I think I'm probably going to be rambling quite a lot. I don't think I'm going to ramble for very long, though. So if you tie Jupiter with the economic cycle, and you say that Jupiter is about economic growth, optimism, money being available, and people being generally confident, you could say symbolically you would want Jupiter to be in as good a position as possible. And you can see that Jupiter is peregrine right now. I mean, I mentioned this yesterday. When Mercury moves into Capricorn, it's no longer in mutual reception to Jupiter. So that means that we may not feel so optimistic about the economy and our own prospects. And if you listen to sort of YouTube videos about the markets, you might come across this term liquidity. And I'm not a great expert on liquidity. And liquidity is, as I understand it, is about how much money is available. It may be about how much money banks have to sort of lend, and how much money can be thrown into the system. And apparently at the moment, I'm just told this, that liquidity is falling. There isn't so much money at the moment. And this might reflect the fact that Jupiter is in a weakened position, and Jupiter's point of maximum weakness is, you could say that it has kind of arrived. I mean, remember we had Jupiter's we had a square between Jupiter and Saturn on Christmas Eve, so Jupiter and Saturn were exactly square. So you could say that this is a time where Jupiter is damaged by the fact that it is square Saturn. Jupiter is still square Saturn. I mean, Jupiter's moving pretty slowly at the moment. And then, Christmas Eve, Jupiter was in mutual reception to Mercury at least. But now, with Mercury moving into Capricorn, Jupiter's lost that advantage. And so the question is, when does Jupiter start to recover? Well, I think it starts to recover possibly around January the 14th. So what happens on January the 14th is that Jupiter goes backwards, and it hits 12 Gemini. So hitting 12 Gemini, that's an important degree for Jupiter to hit, because remember, Jupiter's going back retrograde. So when Jupiter goes back before 12 Gemini, it moves into its own terms. So Jupiter starts to have dignity. Jupiter is no longer peregrine. And so that does make things perhaps a little bit easier after January the 14th. And so that's one aspect of Jupiter. Now we should also remember with Jupiter in general it's a planet that rules the day by day, and Jupiter's in Gemini, and so Jupiter works best in the hours of light. In general, that always happens, and because Jupiter has one thing good to be said about it, and that is that it's a masculine planet in a masculine sign, Jupiter in Gemini, and we get the full benefits of that during daylight. So you could say, even though things are a little bit difficult at the moment, Jupiter is weak. There is a certain lack of optimism, I think, at the moment. Things are perhaps slightly easier by day. So, by night, I think things, when Jupiter is below the horizon, in a place where it kind of is not comfortable, that's when negativity might hit its peak. Now, this peregrine status, which kind of ends on January the 14th, and I think that ends on the 14th. We do get Jupiter getting a boost again on February the 14th. So what happens on February the 14th? On February the 14th, Mercury moves into Pisces, and Mercury stays in Pisces until March the 3rd. So why is that important? It's because, once again, Jupiter is in mutual reception to Mercury, because Jupiter will be in Gemini and Mercury will be in Pisces, and so that mutual reception is going to give Jupiter a boost. So I can't expect you to remember all of this, but if you have an ephemeris, if you look at the planets, just do consider when Jupiter and Mercury are again in mutual reception, and then Mercury retrogrades back on the 3rd of March into Aquarius, and then it goes forward again, and then from, I think, March the 30th to April the 16th, April the 16th, I think that's right. From around then, Mercury remains in Pisces. So Mercury seems weak in Pisces because Mercury is fallen in its detriment in Pisces, but it is in mutual reception with Jupiter, and so the two planets, both in themselves weak, are given this boost. And the thing that we're really looking forward to is June the 9th. And that's June the 9th, when Jupiter moves into Cancer. And Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So Jupiter has strength. And, in terms of the economic cycle, you could say that, once Jupiter goes into Cancer, we have Jupiter in the sign of its exaltation, and we also have Jupiter's making a square to Saturn, and Jupiter square Saturn. Let's just have a look at this Jupiter square Saturn. Here's the Jupiter square Saturn for June the 15th, 2025, and it may be that after June the 15th, things are just going to be just a lot easier, perhaps in an economic sense, because Jupiter will be in Cancer, and it will be exalted, and also Saturn will be in Aries. Now, you could say, with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn being in Aries, yes, they're in square to each other, so there might be particular issues on the actual day of that June the 15th, or just maybe a week or two either side. But in general, Jupiter square Saturn. Remember, Jupiter and Saturn made that conjunction in 2020. Now they're making that applying square. Sorry, not applying square. That first quarter square, the first quarter of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. I think that should give everyone a boost, and Jupiter will be stronger than Saturn. Definitely stronger than Saturn, because Saturn is in Aries, the sign of its fall. Jupiter is in Cancer, the sign of its exaltation. So that might be the time when things really start moving sort of economically. And as you know, my view is that certainly in America, the next 4 years until the Jupiter-Saturn opposition, I think in 2029, 2030, I think things should be good. But it just may be that we're dealing with a sort of short-term wobble as Jupiter kind of goes through Gemini and sometimes, it's okay. It's retrograde at the moment. It won't be retrograde forever. Now, Jupiter does have an impact on the United States. I think we need to look very briefly at the United States' chart and consider Jupiter moving through Gemini. And so here is the United States' chart. And if we take 5:10 p.m., then we have the ascendant at 5:10 p.m. on July the 4th, 1776. We have the ascendant at 12 degrees 21 Sagittarius. So this means in a few days' time, in fact, I think it's January the 10th, Jupiter is on the United States' descendant, and Jupiter is slowing down at this point. So this is the first. This is the crossing of the United States' descendant as it goes retrograde, and then what happens that on February the 4th, Jupiter goes stationary direct at 11:17 Gemini. So in other words, it's going stationary direct very, very close to the United States' descendant, and then it goes direct again, and so it will cross United States' ascendant. When is that? Sort of beginning of March. And then it will move on through Gemini, and I think on May the 1st, Jupiter will make a conjunction to Mars. So what I'm saying is that one feature of Jupiter moving through Gemini is the fact that it chews through the United States' descendant, and just as Trump is becoming president. And I think that this could be, quite a difficult time. And I think when you think about descendants, you think about, I suppose, war and attacks and what the country is getting involved in. And so where is it going to come from? And it may be that the Biden regime is perhaps trying its hardest to make things difficult for Trump, particularly in Ukraine, and they do have different approaches to Ukraine. But we shouldn't be surprised if Jupiter crossing the United States' descendant, but going stationary on United States' descendant, that this does cause a few problems in terms of its relationships with other countries in the world. And yes, it could represent some kind of conflict. Now, I mean, there are different theories about, what is Trump going to do about Ukraine, for example. There is a theory, I was just reading about it yesterday, I think, that Trump, doesn't want to get involved in these big conflicts with countries like Russia and Iran and whatever, and he wants to perhaps focus on smaller conflicts, smaller disagreements. And one disagreement he's perhaps is kind of building himself up for is perhaps one with Denmark regarding Greenland. And I was just wondering, why is Trump so concerned about Greenland? I mean, I think that it could be argued that the United States has legitimate security interests in Greenland. Maybe. Is this something that China is going to be able to eat up? I mean, that seems to be unlikely, and I suppose you could get some attack over the Arctic. But the United States already has a military base in Greenland. But, why Donald? Why Greenland? And, I mean, it might have something to do with astrocartography. So here is Trump's chart, and I don't really want to say much about Trump's chart. I mean, by the way, with Trump's chart, he has got planets in Gemini, and there is if you compare Trump's chart with the United States. So if we put the United States in the middle and we put Trump on the outer wheel, the United States has got its Mars at 21-23 Gemini, and Trump's Sun and his North Node is right on the United States' Mars. In fact, his Uranus is pretty close to its Mars as well. So that is a common point. Now, there could be something about Trump that stirs his country up. Although his North Node hitting Mars, I mean, maybe he's taking the United States in the right direction in terms of its military power. But the point is that Jupiter is now starting to, or will very soon be starting to hit his Sun North Node conjunction. So soon after Jupiter goes over America's Mars, Jupiter will be going over Trump's Sun. So sort of April, May, we have Jupiter transiting quite an important connection between Trump and the country in which he is president of. Now, going back to Greenland and astrocartography. So let's have Trump's chart. So I thought it might be interesting to look at astrocartography for Trump, and what parts of the world might he have an interest in. So these are all, you see these red lines here. This is the place where that red line is, where he would have Uranus on his midheaven. So if he was born in Greenland, he would have Uranus on his midheaven, and he was born at the time of a full moon. And so if we want to move that full moon to his midheaven, it goes right through Greenland. So he actually has some important lines going through Greenland. In fact, there's his Mercury conjunct the midheaven. That's going through Greenland as well. So his 10th, 11th house planets, when you relocate his chart to Greenland, they suddenly become very prominent. And so if we take Trump's chart and we relocate it to Nuuk, I think that's spelled N-W-K, and we relocate Trump's chart to Greenland, here we see that Uranus is on the midheaven, and the Sun, I mean, Uranus on the midheaven, that's particularly noticeable, but the North Node and the Sun are pretty close to the midheaven. They're reasonably close. And so in terms of Trump's aims and his ambitions, when he comes across Greenland, I don't know whether Trump has ever been to Greenland, but when he goes to Greenland, I mean, remember, Greenland's it's a big place. I mean, it's got a lot of it's got a lot of, what's the word? It's got a lot of longitude. So there are going to be parts of Greenland where Uranus is exactly on his midheaven, where Mercury is on his midheaven. but this is just set for Nuuk, which is just one place in Greenland, which is the capital of Greenland. So I think astrologically, you know, we do have some justification for thinking that Greenland might be important for Trump. I don't know whether we can... we can actually get a map of Greenland. So let's get a map of Greenland. So there's Greenland, and so in... we can see, that's all Greenland. There's Iceland. I don't know whether you can see all of that. And so these lines, Uranus on the midheaven, Moon on the IC, Sun on the midheaven, Mercury on the midheaven. You know, they all have an impact. So yeah, so maybe it's not surprising that Greenland is so important for Trump. And so it will be interesting to see what happens with Greenland, remembering that these planets, particularly his sun, the Sun and the Moon and Uranus, are all being aspected by Jupiter. So in the next few months, as Jupiter is conjunct his Sun and is opposition his Moon, you know, that might be a time where he really feels he wants to put a lot of focus on Greenland. Although it's kind of a bit difficult to imagine right now how Trump is actually going to be able to take control of Greenland. Although I know he has said that he doesn't rule out using military force to take control of it. I don't know. We'll have to see. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.